You didn't choose the streets. The streets chose you. Born in a city that was already done with you before you took your first breath. No silver spoon. No safety net. No one coming to save you. Just concrete, cold nights, and a hunger that never went away. Your mother worked 2 jobs and still came home with empty hands. Your father? A name on a piece of paper you stopped looking for by age 7. The lights got cut off so many times, you learned to move through darkness like it was daylight. You were 8 years old, doing things grown men were afraid to do. Not because you were brave, because you had no choice. The neighborhood had its own rules, and nobody taught them in school. You learned them on the corner. You learned them from watching who ate and who starved. You learned them from seeing which men walked tall and which ones walked scared. By age 10, you already understood one thing that most people never figure out their entire lives. Respect isn't given, it's taken. The first crew you ran with was nothing special. 5 kids, 1 corner, selling anything they could get their hands on to anyone who would buy. You were the youngest, but never the weakest. While the others played around, you watched. You watched how money moved. You watched when the police came and which direction they always came from. Even at 10 years old, you understood that information was power. By 12, you were running errands for a man named Dre. Dre was the kind of man the whole block feared. Quiet voice, slow walk, but when Dre spoke, the whole street went still. You watched him the way other kids watched basketball players. Every move, every decision, every time he handled a problem without raising his voice. One day, Dre pulled you aside and said something you never forgot. The ones who survive out here ain't the toughest. They the smartest. Remember that. You remembered. You never stopped remembering. By 13, the errands got more serious. Packages, pickups, messages delivered to men whose names you were told never to repeat. No mistakes, no drama, no talking. You were a ghost with a purpose, and ghosts don't get caught. Then everything changed. One night, Dre got hit. Not killed, but hit bad enough that his operation fractured overnight. Lieutenants grabbed territory. Old alliances collapsed. The block went from controlled chaos to just chaos. And in the middle of all that confusion, a 14-year-old kid saw something nobody else saw. An opportunity. While grown men fought over Dre's scraps, you were building something quiet. You took the 2 blocks nobody wanted, the ones everyone said were worthless. Those dead ends had only one way in and one way out, which meant they were the easiest corners in the city to control. You recruited 3 kids your age. Simple rules. No using. No unnecessary violence. No talking to strangers about business. Keep it clean. Keep it quiet. Keep it moving. Within 6 months, those 2 worthless blocks were generating more consistent money than corners 3 times their size. Because consistency beats chaos every single time. Word got around. It always does. A man named Solomon came to see you. Solomon was the kind of man who had never once stood on a corner. He wore suits, drove foreign cars, had lawyers on speed dial and politicians at his dinner table. You were 15 years old, sitting across from a man worth millions, and you didn't blink. Solomon slid a number across the table. You slid it back and wrote a bigger one. He laughed for the first time in years. He said, "Boy, where did you come from?" You said, "The bottom, and I'm not going back." Solomon put you under his wing that same night. The next 3 years were your real education. How money moved above the street level. How legitimate businesses became shields, how the right lawyer could make a case disappear before it ever reached a courtroom. You absorbed everything. You never wasted a lesson. You never repeated a mistake. By 18, you were no longer running anything for Solomon. You were running alongside him, not because he gave it to you, because you had quietly built enough of your own that he had no choice but to recognize it. The student had become something Solomon never expected: competition. But you didn't fight him. You partnered with him. His connections above, your control below. Nothing moved in that city without passing through one of you. By 21, you had something that took most men decades to build. An organization, Not a gang, not a crew, an organization. With structure, with roles, with rules enforced, not through fear alone, but through loyalty. Because you understood something Solomon never fully grasped. Fear makes people obey. Loyalty makes people die for you. And dying for someone is a completely different thing. You took care of people. Hospital bills disappeared. Evicted families found new homes. Young boys with nothing were given structure and a reason to stay loyal. You weren't just a boss. You were becoming necessary. The feds opened a file on you at 19. By 22, it was 3 inches thick. Surveillance photos, wiretaps, informants inside your outer circle. But your outer circle never knew anything worth knowing. 3 separate investigations opened and closed without a single charge. 3 times prosecutors built what they thought was an airtight case. 3 times your lawyers disassembled it before it ever saw a courtroom. The system built to catch people like you kept running into the same problem. You weren't like people like you. You were something it had never seen before. By 25, the streets called you something you never asked to be called. Untouchable. Not because you were violent, not because you were reckless. Because in a world where everyone eventually fell, you were still standing. And not just standing, growing. Legitimate businesses now. Real ones. A logistics company across 4 states. A real estate portfolio in 3 cities. Restaurants in neighborhoods that used to have nothing. On paper, you were an entrepreneur, a job creator, a community investor. And none of that was entirely a lie, because you actually built those things. Solomon retired and called you the night before he left. 4 words, it's yours now, all of it. You were 26 years old, and you controlled more of that city than the mayor did. They made decisions about the city. You made decisions about what actually happened in it. But power at that level changes things. Everybody wants something from you. Everybody is performing for you. And you can never fully trust anyone completely again. The higher you climb, the lonelier it gets, and the further you have to fall. A federal task force got a new director, young, aggressive, personally motivated. She had been studying your file for 2 years before she even took the job. She was the most dangerous threat you had ever faced. Not because she was violent, because she was patient, and she didn't care how long it took. The chess match between you lasted 4 years. Neither of you blinked. During those years, a kid from your old block got arrested. 17 years old. Wrong place, wrong time, facing 5 years minimum mandatory. You got him the best attorney in the state. The charges got reduced. The kid walked. But sitting in that courtroom, you felt something shift inside you. Something you hadn't felt since you were that same age, with nobody in your corner. What are you actually building? And who does it actually serve? That question didn't have a comfortable answer. Empires built on the suffering of communities are not legacies. They are debts. And debts always come due. You started shifting. Not overnight, but deliberately. Street operations contracted. Legitimate businesses expanded. Youth programs, legal defense organizations, scholarships for kids who reminded you of yourself at 12. Smart, hungry, invisible, to everyone who should be paying attention. At 30, you sat at a table that would have made the 14-year-old version of you unable to breathe. City council members, business executives, foundation directors, all listening to you. None of them knowing the full story of where you came from. The federal task force director finally got her meeting with you. She sat across from you and said, "I know what you are." You looked back at her and said, "Then you know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She had nothing. Not anymore. She closed her notebook, stood up, and walked out. You turned back to the window and looked out over the city. Your city. You thought about that 8-year-old moving through darkness like it was daylight. About Dre. About Solomon. About every corner, every cold night, every moment where you could have broken and didn't. The rising never really stops. You just change what you are rising toward. At first it was survival. Then power. Then security. Then legacy. And legacy is the only one of those things that lives after you do. So you keep building. Not for the streets, not for the money. For that kid, the one with empty hands and a mind full of fire, the one nobody came to save. You were never untouchable. You were just always thinking further ahead than everyone trying to touch you. And when you come from nothing, when you have slept cold and been counted out before you ever counted yourself in, your ceiling isn't the sky. Your ceiling doesn't exist. From the bottom of everything to the top of it all. Not because the world made room for you, because you made room for yourself. And then you made room for everyone coming up behind you. That's not a criminal story. That's not a success story. That is a survival story. And it's still being written.